The rain was pouring down in sheets that Tuesday night in Chicago, the kind of relentless cold rain that soaks through every layer within seconds and turns the city streets into dark, rivers reflecting the orange glow of streetlights. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of small moments to change lives, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness True Stories. Also, tell us in the comments where in the world are you watching from. Jake Morrison was driving his old pickup truck home after a 12-hour shift at the warehouse, his windshield wipers working overtime, his hands tight on the wheel as he navigated the slick roads carefully because he could not afford a single mistake. Not tonight, not ever. He was exhausted in the way only single fathers understand, carrying the weight of two parents inside one tired body, never allowing himself to slow down. Because slowing down meant Lily suffered, and Lily was the one person in this entire world he lived for. His 8-year-old daughter was waiting at home with their neighbor, Mrs. Chen, watching over her, probably already asleep with a book open on her chest, the way she always fell asleep. And Jake smiled faintly at the thought of her as he turned onto the empty downtown street. The rain was so heavy that his headlights barely cut through it, and the road ahead looked like a dark mirror. And that was when everything changed in a single heartbeat. A woman came crashing out from between two parked cars, stumbling wildly, her expensive coat soaked through and torn at the shoulder. Her heels snapped off, her dark hair plastered across her face, and she collapsed, directly in front of his truck, with a scream that pierced through even the roar of the rain. Jake hit the brakes so hard, the truck skidded on the wet asphalt and stopped. Just inches from her body crumpled on the road. His heart was slamming against his ribs as he threw open the door and ran into the downpour, dropping to his knees in the cold, water pooling on the street. Without a single thought for himself, pressing 2 fingers to her neck and finding the faint, weak flutter of a pulse. She was barely breathing, her lips pale, her body shaking violently from the cold and the rain. And Jake looked down at this stranger and felt something rise up in his chest that was bigger than fear, bigger than hesitation. "I won't let you die," he said, the words coming out of him before his mind had even formed them. Pure instinct and pure humanity speaking at once, and he lifted her into his arms and carried her to the truck. Her name was Diana Reeves, and she was the CEO of Reeves Pharmaceutical, one of the most powerful and influential companies in the entire state of Illinois, though Jake knew absolutely none of that as he drove through the pouring rain toward the nearest emergency room with one hand on the wheel and one eye on the unconscious woman beside him, and talking to her the whole way, telling her to hold on, telling her she was going to be fine, telling her she was safe now. He carried her inside himself, refused to hand her over until the doctors took her from his arms, and when they asked him who he was to her, he said simply, "Nobody. Just somebody who found her in the rain." He gave them her name from the ID in her coat pocket, and then he sat in that waiting room for 2 hours in his soaking wet clothes, shivering, not moving, not leaving, until a nurse came out and told him she was stable and she was going to survive. Only then did Jake Morrison stand up, walk back out into the rain, drive home, check on Lily sleeping peacefully, kiss her forehead, and tell himself it was over. It was not over. It was only the beginning of something neither of them could have imagined. Diana woke up in that hospital bed with 2 cracked ribs, severe hypothermia, and a burning clear memory of someone's strong arms, lifting her off the wet ground when she had nothing left in her body to fight with. And when the nurse described the man who had brought her in, she asked for his name immediately. "Jake Morrison," the nurse said. Diana closed her eyes and lay back and thought about the 72 hours that had led to that rainy street. Her vice president, a man named Conrad Wells, whom she had trusted completely for 9 years and who had sat across from her desk through hundreds of meetings, had been secretly moving company funds into hidden accounts and bribing 3 state officials to approve a pharmaceutical drug that Diana's own research team had flagged as potentially fatal to patients with certain heart conditions. When Diana found the files and confronted Conrad directly, she saw something in his eyes she had never seen before, something cold and calculating and completely without mercy. And she knew in that instant that she was in danger. She had copied everything onto a flash drive and sewn it into the lining of her coat and walked out of her own building. And within 20 minutes, 2 men were following her through the rainy downtown streets, closing in. And she had run until her body simply gave out in front of Jake Morrison's truck. When Diana was discharged from the hospital 2 days later, Jake was sitting in the lobby. She stopped when she saw him. This tall, broad-shouldered man in a simple work jacket with honest, tired eyes and a small paper bag from the bakery down the street because Lily had asked him to bring her a muffin, and he had made a detour without fully understanding why he was at the hospital again in the first place. Diana walked toward him slowly and looked at him for a long moment and said, "You saved my life." Jake shifted the paper bag in his hands and said, "You were in the road in the rain." Anyone would have stopped. Diana shook her head, quietly, because she had been in that world long enough to know that was not true, that most people would have driven around her or called someone else or simply looked away. And she said, "Not anyone, you." They stood in that lobby with rain still, falling outside the glass doors, and something passed between them that was not romantic. Not yet, but was real and human and rare. The recognition of one decent person by another. Jake drove her to a hotel because she told him she could not go home, that it was not safe. And he did not ask 100 questions, he simply drove. That night, Diana called her lawyer and her most trusted board member and began the process of bringing everything into the open. But Conrad moved faster than she expected. By morning, there were stories in the press painting Diana as unstable, as someone who had suffered a mental breakdown and collapsed in the street. And suddenly, her credibility was being dismantled piece by people with money and connections and absolutely no conscience. Jake saw the news and drove back to the hotel without anyone asking him to. He brought Lily with him this time because school was cancelled due to flooding, and Lily sat cross-legged on the hotel bed eating her muffin and told Diana very seriously that her dad was the best person she had ever met and that he once stayed up all night when Lily's hamster was sick, even though he had work at 5 in the morning. Diana looked at this little girl with her father's honest eyes and felt something crack, open gently inside her chest. Conrad sent 2 men to the hotel that afternoon, and Jake put himself physically between Diana and the door and told them to leave, with a calm and absolute certainty that made them hesitate just long enough for Diana's lawyer to arrive with a police escort she had quietly arranged. The flash drive was handed over to federal investigators that evening, and the next 48 hours were a storm of press conferences and legal filings, and threats that came through lawyers and anonymous calls to Jake's phone telling him to walk away while he still could. Jake did not walk away. He showed up every single day, drove Diana where she needed to go, sat outside courtrooms in his work jacket among people in $1,000 suits, and never once asked her what any of this was worth, or what he was going to get out of it. Lily drew Diana a picture of the 3 of them standing in the rain under one umbrella and taped it to the hotel room mirror, and Diana kept it there until the day she finally went home. The courtroom was packed on the day Conrad Wells and the 3 officials faced the federal judge, and Diana sat at the front and gave her testimony in a clear, steady voice that did not waver once, walking through every document, every transfer, every meeting, every threat. And the courtroom was so silent you could hear the rain still falling outside against the tall courthouse windows. When it was over and the verdicts came down and Conrad's face went white and the gavel struck and it was finally completely over, Diana walked out of that courthouse into the cold Chicago rain, and Jake was standing at the bottom of the steps with an umbrella and Lily beside him holding a sign she had made herself that said, "We knew you could do it," in purple crayon. Diana laughed for the first time in weeks, a real laugh, and walked down those steps and stood under that umbrella, between a man who had stopped his truck in the rain for a stranger and a little girl who believed in people with her whole heart. And she thought that this was what courage actually looked like. Not the absence of fear, but the presence of someone who refuses to leave. If this story moved you and reminded you that one person's choice can change everything, please like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it today, and subscribe to our channel Kindness True Stories, where every story we tell is a reminder that goodness still exists in this world and that it matters more than ever.